Precious Pearls by Jacob Glow Wisdom brings to you PostGreSQL 10.23 Documentation. Chapter 1, Getting Started.
1.1 Installation.
Before you can use PostgreSQL, you need to install it, of course. It is possible that PostgreSQL is already installed at your site, either because it was included in your operating system distribution or because the system administrator already installed it. If that is the case, you should obtain information from the operating system documentation or your system administrator about how to access PostgreSQL. If you are not sure whether PostgreSQL is already available or whether you can use it for your experimentation, then you can install it yourself. Doing so is not hard and it can be a good exercise. PostgreSQL can be installed by any unprivileged user, no super user, root, access is required. If you are installing PostgreSQL yourself, then refer to Chapter 16 for instructions on installation, and return to this guide when the installation is complete. Be sure to follow closely the section about setting up the appropriate environment variables. If your site administrator has not set things up in the default way, you might have some more work to do. For example, if the database server machine is a remote machine, you will need to set the ghost environment variable to the name of the database server machine. The environment variable port might also have to be set. The bottom line is this: if you try to start an application program and it complains that it cannot connect to the database, you should consult your site administrator or, if that is you, the documentation to make sure that your environment is properly set up. If you did not understand the preceding paragraph, then read the next section.
1.2 Architectural Fundamentals.
Before we proceed, you should understand the basic PostgreSQL system architecture. Understanding how the parts of PostgreSQL interact will make this chapter somewhat clearer. In database jargon, PostgreSQL uses a client-server model. A PostgreSQL session consists of the following cooperating processes, programs. A server process, which manages the database files, accepts connections to the database from client applications, and performs database actions on behalf of the clients. The database server program is called PostGres. The user's client, front-end, application that wants to perform database operations. Client applications can be very diverse in nature. A client could be a text-oriented tool, a graphical application, a web server that accesses the database to display web pages, or a specialized database maintenance tool. Some client applications are supplied with the PostgreSQL distribution, most are developed by users. As is typical of client-server applications, the client and the server can be on different hosts. In that case, they communicate over a TCP/IP network connection. You should keep this in mind, because the files that can be accessed on a client machine might not be accessible, or might only be accessible using a different file name on the database server machine. The PostgreSQL server can handle multiple concurrent connections from clients. To achieve this, it forks, a new process for each connection. From that point on, the client and the new server process communicate without intervention by the original Postgres process. Thus, the master server process is always running, waiting for client connections, whereas client and associated server processes come and go. All of this is of course invisible to the user. We only mention it here for completeness.
1.3 Creating a database.
The first test to see whether you can access the database server is to try to create a database. A running PostgreSQL server can manage many databases. Typically, a separate database is used for each project or for each user. Possibly, your site administrator has already created a database for your use. In that case, you can omit this step and skip ahead to the next section. To create a new database, in this example named mydb, you use the following command: $created mydb. If this produces no response, then this step was successful and you can skip over the remainder of this section. If you see a message similar to "create DB, command not found," then PostgreSQL was not installed properly. Either it was not installed at all or your shell's search path was not set to include it. Try calling the command with an absolute path instead. $usr/local/pgsql/bin/createdb/mydb. The path at your site might be different. Contact your site administrator or check the installation instructions to correct the situation. Another response could be this: CreateDB could not connect to database. Postgres could not connect to server, no such file or directory. Is the server running locally and accepting connections on Unix domain socket/tmp/s pgsql.5432? This means that the server was not started, or it was not started where CreateDB expected it. Again, check the installation instructions or consult the administrator. Another response could be this: CreateDB could not connect to database. Postgres, fatal, role. Joe does not exist. Where your own login name is mentioned. This will happen if the administrator has not created a PostgreSQL user account for you. PostgreSQL user accounts are distinct from operating system user accounts. If you are the administrator, see Chapter 21 for help creating accounts. You will need to become the operating system user under which PostgreSQL was installed, usually Postgres, to create the first user account. It could also be that you were assigned a PostgreSQL username that is different from your operating system username. In that case, you need to use the uSwitch or set the PGUSR environment variable to specify your PostgreSQL username. If you have a user account but it does not have the privileges required to create a database, you will see the following: CreateDB, database creation failed, error, permission denied to create database. Not every user has authorization to create new databases. If PostgreSQL refuses to create databases for you, then the site administrator needs to grant you permission to create databases. Consult your site administrator if this occurs. If you installed PostgreSQL yourself, then you should log in for the purposes of this tutorial under the user account that you started the server as. 1. You can also create databases with other names. PostgreSQL allows you to create any number of databases at a given site. Database names must have an alphabetic first character and are limited to 63 bytes in length. A convenient choice is to create a database with the same name as your current username. Many tools assume that database name is the default, so it can save you some typing. To create that database, simply type $CreateDB. If you do not want to use your database anymore, you can remove it. For example, if you are the owner, creator, of the database MYDB, you can destroy it using the following command: $dropDB MYDB. For this command, the database name does not default to the user account name. You always need to specify it. This action physically removes all files associated with the database and cannot be undone, so this should only be done with a great deal of forethought. More about CreateDB and DropDB can be found in CreateDB and DropDB respectively.
1.4 Accessing a database.
Once you have created a database, you can access it by running the PostgreSQL Interactive Terminal program, called PSQL, which allows you to interactively enter, edit, and execute SQL commands. Using an existing graphical front-end tool like pgadmin or an Office suite with ODBC or JDBC support to create and manipulate a database. These possibilities are not covered in this tutorial. Writing a custom application, using one of the several available language bindings. These possibilities are discussed further in Part 4. You probably want to start up PSQL to try the examples in this tutorial. It can be activated for the MYDB database by typing the command $PSQL MYDB. If you do not supply the database name, then it will default to your user account name. You already discovered this scheme in the previous section using CreateDB. In PSQL, you will be greeted with the following message: PSQL 10.23. Type help for help. MYDB equals. The last line could also be MYDB equals hashtag. That would mean you are a database super user, which is most likely the case if you installed the PostgreSQL instance yourself. Being a super user means that you are not subject to access controls. For the purposes of this tutorial, that is not important. One as an explanation for why this works, PostgreSQL usernames are separate from operating system user accounts. When you connect to a database, you can choose what PostgreSQL username to connect as. If you don't, it will default to the same name as your current operating system account. As it happens, there will always be a PostgreSQL user account that has the same name as the operating system user that started the server, and it also happens that that user always has permission to create databases. Instead of logging in as that user, you can also specify the U option everywhere to select a PostgreSQL username to connect as. If you encounter problems starting PSQL, then go back to the previous section. The diagnostics of CreateDB and PSQL are similar, and if the former worked, the latter should work as well. The last line printed out by PSQL is the prompt, and it indicates that PSQL is listening to you in that. You can type SQL queries into a workspace maintained by PSQL. Try out these commands. MYDB equals select version. Version. PostgreSQL 10.23 on x86_64 PC Linux new, compiled by GCC, Debian. 4.9.2-10, 4.9.2, 64-bit. 1 row. MYDB equals select current_date. Date. January 7, 2024. 1 row. MYDB equals select 2+2. Column. 4. 1 row. The PSQL program has a number of internal commands that are not SQL commands. They begin with the character, \. For example, you can get help on the syntax of various PostgreSQL SQL commands by typing MYDB equals \h. To get out of PSQL, type MYDB equals \q. And PSQL will quit and return you to your command shell. For more internal commands, type \. At the PSQL prompt. The full capabilities of PSQL are documented in PSQL. In this tutorial, we will not use these features explicitly, but you can use them yourself when it is helpful.
Thank you for watching. PostgreSQL 10.23 Documentation. Chapter 1. Getting started. If you like this video, like, share and subscribe to our channel Precious Pearls by Jacob Glow Wisdom. Share your feedback in comments. If you want to have such tutorial for other topics, kindly let us know in comments or write to jacob@glowwisdom.com.